If you were to ask someone looking to find out about Extension for the very first time, to ask 15 people who work for Extension what Extension is, you get 15 different answers.
An agent of change, bringing research-based knowledge to program clientele and community.
A land-grant institution that serves the people.
The most important mechanism in providing objective information to the public for enhanced decision-making.
An unbiased source of information. A partner in providing research to find answers to my questions. A connection between individuals and Cornell University. A trusted resource in our community.
An organization rooted in each local community, leveraging the research knowledge and expertise of the university, assisting individual New Yorkers, empowering them to build a local economy and solve local problems.
Helping others help themselves.
An organization
that fills the education gap with real learning to move everyone into a better, healthier, more financially responsible, freer tomorrow.
Historically relevant for many reasons, but becoming less so to ordinary citizens due to the lack of funding for community horticulture programs, horticultural departments throughout the state.
A reliable resource for many questions needing answers, as well as a
reliable source of information on a myriad of subjects. If CCE doesn't have the answer or cover the topic, they're usually able to make a credible reference to someone who does.
Commitment to the public that the university is investing in providing all people training and knowledge to improve their lives, businesses, well-being, and environment.
Education/resources in the communities for things that matter to them, although it does seem somewhat limited to certain groups within a community.
A fabulous resource that is underutilized.
A people's college in its finest moments.
A life calling of all of us doing extension work.
A life calling. As an educator, what do you do with all of that information? A new Extension employee may have been on their job 8 months before attending a new staff orientation meeting. When I first joined Extension, I'd been on the job 3 years before I had that meeting. The definition of Extension and its objectives varies incredibly across the state.
So, to understand Extension, I think you need to know a little history. Sponsored by Vermont Congressman Justin Morrill, the Morrill Land Grant Act was signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln on July 2nd, 1862, officially titled
An act donating public lands to the several states and territories which may provide colleges for the benefit of agriculture and the mechanic arts.
Yes. The Morrill Act provided each state with 30,000 acres of federal land for each member in a congressional delegation. The land was then sold by the states, and the proceeds used to fund public colleges that focused on agricultural and mechanical arts. 69 colleges were funded by these land grants, including Cornell University. Now, the Smith-Lever Act,
An act to provide for cooperative agricultural extension work between the agricultural colleges in the several states receiving the benefits of an act of Congress, approved July 2nd, 1862.
is a United States federal law.
And of act supplementary thereto, and the United States Department of Agriculture.
The Smith-Lever Act is a United States federal law that established a system of cooperative extension services connected to land-grant universities in order to inform people about current developments in agriculture and food systems, community and economic vitality, environment and natural resources, nutrition and healthy families, and youth development.
According to 3 early studies of adult education, the objectives of Extension service include the following. 1, to increase the net income of the individual farmer through more efficient and economical production. 2, to cultivate a desire for a more satisfying home life.
Daddies!
3, to encourage more comfortable, convenient, beautiful, healthful homes and surroundings. 4, to implant an appreciation of and love for rural life in farm boys and girls. To advance the educational and spiritual needs for rural people. 6, to acquaint the general public with the needs and ideals of agriculture and its place in the national structure. 7, to foster cultural, social, recreational, and community life of rural people. 8, to improve the quality of agricultural products for the purpose of increasing income, meeting competition from abroad more successfully, and giving a greater service to the consumer. 9, to encourage the general participation of farm people in agricultural organizations for the purpose of becoming an effective and helpful influence in local, county, state, and national affairs. 10, to develop rural leadership. Again, as an educator, what do you do with all of this information? Who is Extension? And who is it for?
B.S. Hinkle went out to western Arkansas to be an agent. When he arrived at his small office, there was a sign on the door that read, "We don't want no county agent." Well, Hinkle made it his job to doctor animals in order to get close to people. That went on for years until I asked the district agent to see Hinkle and ask him to quit doing so many personal things and change to being more of an educator. When the district agent failed, I went out myself to make the plea, to which Hinkle agreed, but while we were talking, a farmer was pacing the corridor. Hinkle went out to see him and found his problem was a sick cow. Hinkle told the man to go home and he'd come out later. Then Hinkle asked me to take a trip with him out into the country. He stopped at a farmhouse, took his shoebox out from the back seat, and went in to help the farmer. Finally, he came back out to the car. He was talking real hard and fast, expecting trouble from me. I stopped him and I said, "Just wait a minute. That conference that we just had on your doing personal service work, well, just forget the whole thing. I saw that here was an agent doing a service job to the advantage of himself and Extension." At his farewell banquet, Hinkle brought out the "We don't want no county agent" sign that had been on his office door when he arrived 31 years before. And he showed that sign to a room full of people who now loved him.
I've been with the Cooperative Extension forever. Actually, what happened was when my eldest son started school, they were trying out this program. It was called the Family Group. It was a precursor to what they have now with the family assistants dealing with different problems that the parents might have and helping them to communicate with the school. My son was going to PS38 at the time in Brooklyn. I had gone into the center and I was talking to the person who was in charge, Vivian, I don't remember what her last name was, and she asked me,
Have you gotten a call from Cornell?
"What?"
Yeah, they're starting a program, and they had asked if there were parents who would be good as family assistants.
That's what they were called at the time. She had recommended me. In the interview, they asked me what I would do if I won $1 million, and I told them that after I woke up from the coma, I would probably decide something. That started my career back in 1969. I started working for the expanded food and nutrition education program in 1980. Through all the experiences that I've had in working for Cornell, I feel that one of the biggest strengths of any program in cooperative extension is the fact that we have in-services. And that we're asked what kind of in-services we want. It's not just nutrition, although the nutrition is very important because that's the basis of every program that I'm doing right now, but it's bringing, I guess, a part of yourself. What makes it special to me is that it's a challenge. There are some people who feel that they know everything, and there are some people like me who feel that they know very little and that they need to learn more. And it's not just from one person. We pick up from each other. We learn from each other. A good example, there was a lady from the Middle East, and she kept telling me she didn't think she could come. I asked her why.
I don't speak English.
That's funny, I understand you.
No, my English isn't very good.
Well, let's see. Do you understand her?
Yep.
So she came. At the end of the program, she brought a dish that they eat in her country, and she gave everyone the recipe in English. I've never been bored at this job, except doing paperwork, but never doing groups, because because people are different. Every group I do is different. Every week, depending on what kind of week they had, how they're going to relate to me. One lady, she has a little baby. The baby is 8 months old. She is so cute. She is always saying something, and I'm always talking to her, and she smiles. Her brother is in the pre-K program, and he says to me, "Why are you talking to her? Why are you answering her? She's not talking." I said, "Well, she is to her. She's saying something, only I'm not smart enough. I don't understand what she's saying." And he looked at me like, whoa. And the mother was laughing. She says to me,
This baby is constantly talking.
"She's very alert. She's always looking around. She's one of those babies that you just want to hug and kiss." I mean, well, I think that about all the babies, but she is delicious. That's what I tell her. Your child is delicious.
You know, I did not want to come because I have to bring the baby.
So what? The baby listened too. So she got over that. We had some cheese tasting. She had never eaten Munster cheese.
Oh, I like that cheese very much. It was so good.
She comes from Haiti.
I'm so tired of eating Haitian food.
Well, maybe you can start introducing new kinds of things.
Oh, I am. But I don't know about my husband.
You can always tell someone will make a good community educator assistant by the way they deal with other people. To me, yeah, you can learn about nutrition. You can read a script. You can, my name is blank. I'm from Cornell Cooperative Extension. We're a part of Cornell, blah, blah, blah. You can read a script. But actually having a feel for people, having a genuine concern, wanting to do something for your community, because actually they start off working in their community. That can't be taught.
I've been on the agent job a few years in Ohio, and a smooth organizer came in a Model T, as I had. But he came to organize a Ku Klux Klan. He started collecting $10 a person for membership. The county had no Negroes, so that wasn't a problem with the Klan. But it had a good many Catholics, who included some of the best farmers in the county. About my second meeting with the Farm Bureau Board, the Klan came up for discussion. The secretary said that some of the people were disturbed about what the Catholics were doing to the country, and that, quote, "we may not want their membership." I was green enough to comment that I didn't think it ought to matter to a farm organization what a man's religion was. After that, the Bureau Secretary gave me a lot of trouble, trying to upset farmers' institutes and such. One day, I came back to the office, which had the only mimeograph in town, and noticed the machine had been running. Looked in the wastebasket and found second sheets for notices of a secret Klan meeting. I asked the local editor to run the notice in his paper without comment. Apparently, Klan members thought that one other group had divulged a secret. That meeting was never held, nor were there any others as far as I know.
I live here on Maple Slope Farm in Homer, New York. One side of the family came here in 1794 and kept a parcel for fighting in the Revolutionary War, and we've been here ever since. So I guess part of being a family farmer is that tradition of, well, you don't move on because that's part of who you are. We're here. My dad was born and died in this house. I haven't lived here for about 25 years, but now I'm back here, so. Now, we grew up, my dad, he was the only son in the family. He went to Morrisville College, and in agriculture. His father died when he was 14, and so being the only boy, I don't know if farming was his calling, but that was just expected. He was born in 1915. So when he started the farm here, when we took over the farm, at that time they had butter works here. It was Maple Slope Butter Farm. And they made butter and had a milk wagon in the village of Homer, and milk cows, and had, I guess, we would call a diversified farm. And I guess part of that process, is, well, he always appreciated other people's opinions. And he always got the American Agriculturalist, Towards Dairyman, various farm journals, a lot of publications. And of course, being our proximity to Cornell University, you know, we were just 25 miles away, so we had a registered Jersey herd. And so his connection with probably Extension and Cornell came both through the early Extension programs, but also through New York Artificial Breeders Association over at Cornell that he was a member of for many years. For me as a kid, we were in 4-H and Junior Grange right up through. And so going to the county fair and being in 4-H and doing demonstrations and that type of thing was all kind of a part of what the expectation was, you know? Or I guess we just didn't really know any better. I still know all of the farm families and neighbors. But you know, half the road now, I wouldn't know who lived in those houses. I think that that's where the growth is in agriculture now. As you see, you know, small farms, maybe they're going to grow a few acres of vegetables, or my neighbor has alpacas. But you know, there's that whole diversification thing that's coming back full circle now on a small, more intense scale. And certainly that's where Extension is focused, on a new generation of farmers, really, and what their needs are. I think a lot of them are coming from suburban or urban, lives where they were brought up in a non-farm community, maybe have advanced degrees in another discipline and either aren't finding the work that they thought their passion was, or maybe they've seen a new interest in living in the country. It's just fascinating to see the interest in the growth of a small, diversified farm that, you thought 25 years ago, you thought it was history. And here we are, repeating it all over again.
In the Hudson Valley, there's been sort of an uptick in, I guess I want to call them hipsters.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time we have here, but I was just there a couple months ago. We went to the Berkshires, which isn't really the Hudson Valley, but it's the same in many ways. And I was out with my son, and we were getting ready. We were going to make dinner for the whole family. And so we were out buying stuff, and we went past a butcher shop. And I was like, butcher shop? And so we pulled in, and part of it was like walking to something I worked in that would have existed maybe 50 years ago. When I was working in the local butcher shop. And part of it was this incredible hipster scene.
Yeah.
Well, up until that point, I was really jaded by my perspective of hipsters. But it finally struck me that there are things that are happening, things that are being revitalized, arts and crafts, and that's the fading. They're being revitalized by this generation. And I know that there's a lot of farming and whatnot that goes on in the Hudson Valley. This time is that. Is this something you experience in your area? Or do they not stray that far away from New York City?
Oh yeah, they occasionally go west of Syracuse. I think I even saw a few last week. But I think that, I don't know what we would call it, but a younger generation of people are another huge growth audience for cooperative extension. And those are the people that are going to hit on Twitter and other social media. And they're responsible, at a minimum at least, for raising the social conscious or awareness of the benefits of, yes, locally sourced meats and produce. And those are a growing part of who we work with. They can represent a challenge to extension because oftentimes they don't come from agricultural backgrounds. They may come from an urban or even a suburban background. So they don't have the generational esteem for the land-grant university because they haven't been exposed to it through the county fairs and 4-H programs, or their parents sitting on the local cooperative extension board. This is all new to them. And what we do is very relevant to them as well. We need to reach out to them as much as we do anything.
So, if I was a 20-something from Brooklyn, just moved into your community, how would you describe extension to me?
Extension, and again, I work in agriculture, and I know that extension is more than agriculture, but I would talk mainly about agriculture from my perspective. But extension is an outreach effort of Cornell University to help people succeed in farming. We are a partnership between local governments and state government, as well as the federal government and the university, and we're critical to the success of the industry here. And we'd love to work with you. We are very, very nice people.
We are.
That's who we work with, is people.
Yeah.
My mother worked in Extension many years ago, so I'm kind of a child of Extension. I grew up in the office, more or less. I was there a lot. And there were always hundreds of publications all around. People that constantly came in and said, I need that recipe. You know that one. The one for the zucchini bread that's really good. Or the one that uses all the leftover vegetables from the garden, or whatever. Now that I work at Extension, I'm finding out that a lot of people still come in looking for all of those things. Now, when I was a child and my mother was, well, she was actually had a degree in animal nutrition, but she always tried to teach nutrition to us kids, and we did one of those things like, we don't want to hear it, you know? And she always had a big garden. And when I grew up, and I first had kids, I didn't want anything to do with the garden. It was too much work, and I didn't want to do any of that. And now I've gone back. We have a huge garden. We have spent the last 2 weeks canning just about every night. And I find myself digging, looking through all of my mother's things, looking for all of those old extension publications. Actually found some of them online, on the Cornell site, but not all of them. And I called up older extension agents and said, hey, where's that? I remember making peanut butter fudge, which was a lot like the peanut butter balls with the dry milk and the peanut butter and all of that. Where is that recipe? And it's just that I was thinking about how odd it is that things go around in circles like that, you know? I grew up with all of that, and then I shunned it as an adult, and then I got kids, and I was like, oh, I want my kids to be healthy. But I don't know, I don't want to beat my mother and lecture them on being healthy, because I never enjoyed that as a child. And now I find, as they are adults, I am lecturing them on this is what you need to do for your children. And so, I don't know, I thought it was odd how everything goes in a circle, and I got back to looking for that kind of information, and not all of it is on the internet. And so, if there's not somebody that's reaching out and teaching it to you, if there's not a class on canning or nutritional education, where do you actually find that? Because there's so much information out there, and not all of it is reliable. You can YouTube how to can tomatoes and find 50 videos, but which one of them is the best way and produces the best result? I'm just looking for some way to loop back to the education system that was more one-on-one, people to people. And there's a way to direct them to a site where they can find the information while still knowing that it's reliable. That's not just anybody in their kitchen putting on a YouTube video who actually doesn't know anything about canning vegetables and why you need to blanch them first to keep the nutrition in, and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of thing I look for. Look to Extension for.
So, evidence-based or what?
With evidence-based programs, they're very rigorously tested in this randomized controlled trial design. So you may have 14 sites where family and youth are actually getting the program. The treatment, this again, is borrowed from the medical model in 14 sites, which are the control group. They are not participating in the program. Randomized controlled trials are very expensive. They're very This program caused this. So there's been a movement towards evidence-based programs from funders because they want to know that if they're funding something, a project, it is using a program that's known to work.
But does it work? Here's one of the things I'm looking at, and this is through the lens of diversity and inclusion. In the trade-off in this piece on evidence-based, there's this language of new audiences and non-traditional audiences, which I think in many ways is inaccurate language. Because these are not new audiences. These audiences have been here for a long time. We just have not been very effective into tapping into them.
Well, there are pluses and minuses. You pluck a program off your shelf and it has to meet your needs as opposed to you being able to adapt it to meet your needs. There's very little adaptability with evidence-based programs.
Even when programs are evidence-based, there's still work that needs to be done to ensure that it works and that it's effective in our area. Sometimes people say, well, it's evidence-based. It's already been proven to do X, Y, and Z, so you don't have to do that work because they've already proved that. But not necessarily in this environment, not necessarily with our audiences, and so...
It's a model, it's a delivery model for a way of getting these programs out into our communities.
Are we truly assessing the needs of those communities? My concern with evidence-based programming is who's at the table. Who's at the table when the research is happening? Who's included, as well as who's not included?
It's a little different than what we do in extension, because an extension educator is just raring to hit the ground running with the program and implement that program. This kind of forced us to pull back a lot.
New audiences, because we'll have done the work.
So, Cornell's efforts to address the needs of farm workers and their family began long ago, where we had students who actually worked alongside migrant workers in Wayne County. In the 1960s, those students went to the faculty senate and said, we think that Cornell should have some effort that addresses the needs of farm workers to go side by side with the efforts to address the needs of farmers. We have a very explicit mission, which is to address the needs of farm workers and their families who are stakeholders in New York State. That's a critical piece to have front and center, to understand that we have a very explicit mission. We have a very explicit vision, and that our work is focused around that. So we envision a society in which farm workers live in decent housing and earn a living wage and are fully integrated into the communities in which they live. For some communities, we still have a long ways to go, but with that vision in mind and with our mission as an underlying force, we certainly have efforts that can help to accomplish that. There are many, many things that we can do. Like any program, we can be criticized by whoever thinks differently or whoever doesn't value the contributions of farm workers and their families, but that doesn't change our work or our mission or what drives the program. The major challenge we face today is the erosion of funding for this kind of work, the erosion of funding for extension. And even since I've come to this program, we've had dramatic funding cuts, which leave any extension effort vulnerable to the whims of funders rather than to the mission. Most of the funding tends to be towards agricultural innovation, towards production issues, and yet we face now in New York State a situation in which farm owners worry about the stability of their labor force. You've heard it all around the state, labor shortages, yet we aren't putting any funding into those efforts to try to create greater stability or greater well-being amongst the workforce. We're at an important moment where there's been a lot of press around the yogurt boom in New York State, and opportunities for dairy producers to expand production, but unless they have more workers, they can't have more cows. And so we see that this kind of critical absence of the workforce in many of the debates, it's to the detriment of agriculture in New York State.
Cornell Cooperative Extension has been in New York City since the late 60s, 70s. Most of the New York City staff were hired to work in the neighborhoods they lived in. There was a link between Cornell programs and the neighborhoods they served. That was one of the things that drew me to Cornell, the ability to serve my community. I've been research educator for workforce and 4-H youth development for 3 to 4 years. I've been with Cornell since 1988. Living in the communities where we work has given staff and Cornell Park Extension NYC validity in the communities we serve. It definitely gives you commitment. You go beyond just your job title or what your job description says. We are bound to the community because we want to see a change in the communities we've been in. People know us. We have name recognition and credibility. The people trust us. And it's taken a long time to develop that trust. You have to keep showing up, keep going back, and deliver what you say you're going to deliver. You have to. When you're working with people, and this is key, you can't come in heavy-handed as if we're Cornell. We're in all real. Because when you look at our mission statement, when you look at the mission of Cornell, it takes the learning from campus, all the research, and then it applies it to community. Now that's a different spirit. I like linking people with each other. I like the one-on-one. During the last session, we always had a panel discussion on alternatives to college and careers. This time, I had a young woman who was into art. She thought she wanted to go into photography, but her teacher, who was a photography major, really discouraged her and told her that there was no money in it. But we had someone else here who was in advertising and who was working for Forbes magazine. She was here as a lecturer and sharing how, when she was in college, her photography was able to get her layout jobs and print issues. And now, with all the work on the web, photographers are really in demand because people who are advertising on the web are looking for photographers to bring their visuals to life. So there's a whole new realm. She also talked about opportunities for jobs while you're in college, when you're developing your portfolio, your internships, and that sort of thing. She opened up a wealth of opportunities right here in New York City. People are hiring high school students and college students. This young woman went from, I'm not even going to think about photography, I just try something else, to, by the end of the session, having a contact, a name, a whole wealth of things. It's the linkages. You have options, but you never know them if you don't go out and explore them. And you don't apply. You gotta dream.
What do we do with the myriad answers to this question, what is extension and what should it be?
How do we chart a path from where we've been to where we're going when we have so many different ideas about where we are?
And what about the money?
Yes, and there's the money.
How can cooperative extension be an economic engine for our communities?
How do we articulate our investment in community capitals?
What will Cornell do if communities reject evidence-based programs?
Is Cornell doing research on people who have never been involved with extension?
What they think it is,
What they think it does?
and whether they need it?
Why can't the university do a little research on marketing?
How come you Cornell guys didn't have a deliberative forum back in 1914?
How much of where we were then is relevant to where we are now?
Where are we now?
I can't come up with the name of the program that Extension developed, but it consisted of actually getting eggs and building an incubator out of a styrofoam picnic cooler and hatching the eggs. So the young people would learn basically about the biological process of hatching and so on. And we used that in New York City, a huge program. We ran that mostly through the schools. One very interesting little incident that happened when we were teaching this to, I don't think she was a school teacher. I think she was working with a community group. And the woman was trying to understand how she could make this hatching of chickens relate to the young women she was working with. And she was just having trouble making that connection. You know, here's an egg that's out here in an incubator, and what's that got to do with, well, I don't know who it was. Maybe it was even me. Maybe it was one of the other people that suddenly had the idea to say to this woman, well, you lay an egg every month. Chickens may lay an egg a lot more often, and it's an external egg, but it's basically the same process. And you could sort of see the light go on in her head. That woman became an amazing teacher to those young women. And she talked about menstruation and ovulation and pregnancy and things like that. And that's one of the things you can do with that sort of thing. She made that connection, and it was real.
Artistic Director of Civic Ensemble, and we just give another hand to very briefly, you guys have been sitting for a minute. So what I want to do is, I want to just tell you a couple of things. Number one, 95% of that were your words. I mean the words of people from Extension, a variety of places, interviews, deliberative forums, things that actual text that was written, all kinds of material, but 95% of that was the words of Extension. So we were just kind of letting you know what you said and sharing it with everybody in a little bit different form. And we wanted to just kind of like start off and just kind of throw it at you and figured you'd recognize some of it. So, but thank you for your patience. Right now, what I want to ask you to do is listen to you, yourselves, and your colleagues. And what I'd like you to do is just for the next 3 to 5 minutes is to stand up, if you can, if you're able to. And what I want you to do is I want you to, if you can, find someone you don't know. And you could like talk over seats. I'm sure there's probably someone like not far from you don't know. Find someone you don't know, and I want you to ask each other the question, what did you see today that surprised you? What did you see today on stage that surprised you? Particularly, or here, particularly as it relates to the content. Okay? All right? Great. You got 3 minutes. Find a stranger. Go.
Yeah.